Stepping out in faith and doing something that God has called you to do can be so scary. When you make that step, you don't know how it's going to turn out. Am I going to fall on my face? How am I going to know what next step I'm supposed to take? How do I know if it's really God telling me to do this or if it's just myself? And what about the fear that comes with stepping out in faith? The fear of failing, the fear of messing up, the fear of, what if this is just me and it's not you telling me to do this? So how do we navigate this? How do we step out in faith even if we're scared? And that's what this episode is about. I'm going to tell you about a time recently that God called me to step out in faith, what ended up happening, and some encouragement for you if you're feeling like God is telling you to do something and it's scaring you a little bit, and you're not really sure if you should take that step of faith. I pray this episode encourages you to take that step. I pray this episode blesses you. Welcome to Unlocking Joy After Grief. My name's Courtney, wife, mama of 6 kiddos, one in heaven waiting for us, and that's why I'm here. In 2017, we lost our 4-year-old son, Sam, and it's my joy to share with you everything this journey has taught me. So if you're ready for biblical encouragement, first-hand lessons, and support from a fellow grieving mama, then let's lace up our shoes and begin walking this road together. You know that feeling when you know God is telling you to do something, but you keep either rationalizing your way out of it or just completely ignoring it. And every time you rationalize it away or you ignore it, the Holy Spirit keeps bringing it back up in your mind over and over and over again until finally you're like, okay, fine, I'll listen. I'll do it. That was recently something that happened with me. I knew God was telling me to do something and it scared me so bad. And so I kept kind of rationalizing my way out of it. Well, no, I don't need to do this because XYZ. And what God was asking me to do would directly affect the income that was coming in through my job. And when you start talking about taking away income out of your life, it can bring all sorts of fear to the surface. How am I going to pay bills? We depend on this money. Like if I take this step of faith, which I believe you're telling me to do, how is it going to work out? I don't want to go into too much details just to kind of protect the privacy of the situation, but I will give kind of an overview of what God was calling me to do when I finally stepped out, what happened. So I'm a virtual assistant. I have been doing this for going on 5 years now, and I have multiple clients in my caseload. About 80% of my income was tied up in this one client. I had been feeling for a while that I needed to let this client go for multiple reasons, and the Holy Spirit kept telling me this. And every time I would think about putting in my notice, I would get scared. But God, that's the majority of my income. If I let this client go, what if I can't find another client? I need to find another client first and then let this client go. So that way I know my income is covered. But every time I started looking for another client, nothing ever worked out. I could never find anything. And again, I felt the nudge of the Holy Spirit, just take that step and put your notice in. But y'all, it was so scary. So this went on for a few weeks, this back and forth conversation between me and God, Him telling me what I knew I needed to do, but me rationalizing my way out of it, listening to fear over faith. But God knew that sometimes it takes some convincing for me because I don't like change. But He was waiting on me to take that step of faith. He was saying, Courtney, do you trust me in every single area of your life? And of course I do. Losing Sam deepened my trust in God even greater than it was before because He saw me through the greatest trial that I will ever have to walk through. He was there for me. He healed my heart piece by piece. And so, of course, I trust Him. He carried me through the biggest storm I'll ever have to face. So everything after that storm, of course I trust Him with it. But when you're in the middle of it and you're having to make that decision, it can be so hard, especially when you don't know how it's going to work out. But a lot of the times, until you take that step of faith, you won't know. It reminds me of the Indiana Jones movie, The Last Crusade. He was in the little temple thing trying to get the treasure. He was standing on this cliff and he looked down and it was just this ravine. And where he had to go was on the other side of this ravine, like this big long stretch of nothingness. And it didn't seem like there was any way to get from where he was to where he wanted to go. Because when he looked down, it was like a straight drop. There wasn't a bridge, there wasn't a rope to swing on, nothing. And he remembered something that was in his dad's journal, and I might be getting the details somewhat mixed up here. So if y'all are Indiana Jones, like gurus, I apologize. But he remembered something in his dad's journal or something his dad told him to take this step of faith. And so he stuck his foot out off of the cliff and put it down. And he didn't think there was anything there because when he looked down, he didn't see anything. But there was like an invisible stair there that like blended in with the ravine where you couldn't see it until you took that step down. But he didn't know that. When he put his foot out and put it down, he thought he was going to die. He was going down into that ravine and that was it. But he didn't know that there was a step there, a stone that he could walk across to the other side. And it wasn't until he took that step of faith that he realized something was there to hold him up. And that's exactly what happens when God calls us to take this step of faith, whatever it is, and we do it. It's then that we see, oh, okay, that's how you're going to work it out. That's how you're going to keep me from falling. But it's that act of obedience and trust of Him that we have to do first before we see it. And I want to say that when we do it that way, when we take that step of faith, when we don't know how it's going to work, but we take it because we trust in Him, the story that comes with that is so much more amazing than if we had known beforehand, okay, this is how it's going to work out, because then that's not a step of faith. If we know that it's going to work out, then that's an easy step. And sometimes that's how it is. But sometimes He just wants to see, like, do you trust me enough to take this step that I'm telling you to take? Because I'm right here. I'm not going to let you fall, and just wait to see what I have in store for you. So back to my story. I put in my notice, terrified out of my mind, because again, that was like the majority of my income. And I was like, all right, God, yeah, we have 2 weeks to come up with something. But y'all, I didn't even have to wait 2 weeks. So this was on Friday, that following Tuesday. So 4 days after I put in my notice, I was able to get another client who was a dream client of mine. So God not only replaced the work I lost hour by hour, dollar by dollar, but He replaced it with something 10 times better than what I gave up. And so if that's you, if you are in a place where you can feel God asking you to do something, but it terrifies you because you don't know how it's going to work out, I want to encourage you to take that step of faith. Take that step and just see how God will work it out in your life. One of my former pastors used to say, if it excites you and terrifies you all at the same time, it's God. So if the thought of doing whatever it is that He's asking you to do excites you but scares you out of your mind, then that's a good indicator that it's Him telling you to do it. Because the thought of it excites you, but you're not sure of the next step or how it's going to end or what it's going to look like. And so that's scary, especially if you're like me and I like to have everything planned out. And so when God tells you to do something and you don't know what step 3 is going to look like, what step 4 is going to look like, how is it going to end? How is it going to work out? It doesn't make sense. It can be hard to take that step. But I want to encourage you with my story that when you take that step of faith and complete and total trust in God, then you'll be able to see what He has in store for your obedience, that sacrifice you made to step out without knowing how it was going to end. And I want to say that is probably the majority of our faith walk, is stepping out in faith, because He wants to see, do you trust me enough to do this? If I just give you the next step, will you take it? Even if you can't see past that first step, will you keep walking with me? And so what's one thing that you can do with this story that I've given you? If, as I've been talking, the Holy Spirit's been nudging your heart and saying, you know what you have to do, I want you to remember all the times that God has been there for you, all the times that He's seen you through hard situations. Let those times in the past build your trust in Him. Bring it back into the forefront of your mind, and let that be an encouragement to you that if He was there for you before, He's the same yesterday, today, and forever, right? So if He was there for you before, He's still there. He's a constant in our lives, and He will be there as you take this step of faith. Whatever it is in your life, I want to encourage you, because what's waiting on the other side is going to blow your mind. I love when God does this. It's the coolest stories to tell of Him and His faithfulness. But we have to play a part in this story. We wouldn't have a story to tell without our part. Our part is taking that step of trust in Him and doing the thing that He's asking us to do, even though we don't know how it's going to work out. So I want you to remember what God's done for you. Bring to the front of your mind all the times He's been faithful, all the other times in the past that you've stepped out in faith and it's worked out. Bring that to your mind to build your courage enough to take that step. And then I want you to do it. Take that step and just see what He'll do with your faith. I'll see you next week. Love you, friend. Hi, Mama. I hope this episode blessed you. If so, would you mind sharing it with a fellow grieving mama who may need some encouragement on her grief journey? Also, please take 30 seconds and leave a rating and a written review wherever you listen to this episode. Reading your reviews brings so much joy to my heart, and I love connecting with you in that way. All right, I'll see you here next Thursday for another episode. Love you, friend.